There's a part of this situation that I haven't really heard anybody talk about in this exact way. And I think it's really important, mostly because the other post that I made that talks about how the clips of Taylor, Frankie, Paul, and Gabby Petito are almost identical, especially in the way that Dakota and Brian both show up in the body cam footage. And that is how Taylor, Frankie, Paul, and Gabby Petito are both nearly inconsolable. They're both gasping. They're both in a state where they are crying very hard and almost apologetic. Like Gabby Petito is for sure apologetic, and she's worried and she's upset. And then how similar both Dakota and Brian are, being that when they're talking to the cops, they're closer to the way that I sound than they are to the way Gabby or Taylor, Frankie, Paul sound, where they're super emotional, can barely talk, and so upset that it's hard for them to even communicate. And I've been thinking about this all day because I'm thinking, why aren't people picking up on this? Why aren't they understanding that in this situation, it's not that Taylor is abusive to Dakota solely because she's an abusive person? Yes, she's violent. Yes, she's being harmful, but that does not make her the person who's in the position of power and control in this relationship. And when you look at the power dynamics, because you cannot look at abuse from the standpoint of violence. Like, abuse is not just violence. Abuse is not just harm. Where there is violence and harm does not mean that each individual person is engaging in abuse, because the problem with that is that abuse is always a structure of unequal power and control over another person. So when we look at it from the standpoint of a structure of unequal power and control, a victim cannot reverse that structure of power and control over them. Yes, they can react, they can respond with violence and harm, but it does not mean they are reversing the structure of power and control over them. Here's a reminder.
Taylor, the neighbors called in, said they heard a bunch of yelling. Tell me what happened to me.
He me in the garage, and it's fine. I don't give a. I just don't want. I don't want to be separated.
You can have anxiety?
Yeah, no, we're a team, please.
There's no, what is it?
No, like, we're a team, please. It's gonna give me so much anxiety. Can we just have like a driving ticket?
You know what? The reality, that's the reality of this, is that you were victimized tonight. And that's why we're here, is we don't want further violence.
Yeah.
And maybe this is the reality check she needs, that like, hey, I need to get things in check. So, I just want to talk to you real quick.
Sorry, the one kid just
Charged with domestic violence.
Oh my gosh.
But that's, I know that's hard to hear, but that's the reality of the situation, and I'm glad that it wasn't worse. Because, like, what if she was throwing stuff at you and damaging your property?
Kitchen knife or something.
Like, what if the off chance that she grabbed a kitchen knife, like, it's already clear that she wasn't thinking straight, right?
Yeah.
Normally, what if she was to grab the knife or something else and it escalates again? So the main thing is a reality check saying, like, hey, that's not okay. And ignoring it's not going to help the problem either.
Yeah.
Like, you guys waking up tomorrow morning and acting like it never happened, or having one little conversation and maybe like a smack on the wrist, that doesn't typically help.
The witness did not see you strike her. So at this point, you're the victim of a domestic assault. That even if, now, I don't want to take this small 20, what is she?
Yes, a 22-year-old.
22-year-old female in jail.
jail.
You could definitely defend yourself against, but at the same time, we can't say because you're a male and she's a female, we can't treat this different than if you were the male hitting her. We got to treat it the same.
Yeah, no.
So So she's kind of in a tough spot. So unless you have an idea about how she can not go to jail and be separated, do you have friends in town? Somewhere she can stay? Tomorrow, if you want to, it's up to you. You can
Can I
go
go to jail?
You can't because we don't have a charge for you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And remember, we're a team. Me and her are a team. I'm sorry about all this.
I don't want to be.
What I wanted to point out in these clips and both of these situations is that both of the women, Gabby Petito and Taylor Frankie Paul, were triggered to the core of their nervous system. They were deep in their trauma brains, triggered into their fight, flight, flee, or fawn responses. And both of these men were calm, cool, and collected, which means neither of these men were triggered into their fight, flight, flee, or fawn brains. They were not in their trauma brains because they were not terrified. What you see in the video of Taylor Frankie Paul is Taylor in her fight, flight, flee, fawn response. She is deep in her trauma response after a situation where Dakota had thrown her. You are not seeing somebody who is acting logically because they are no longer in the logical part of their brain. Taylor and Gabby both were in their trauma brains because they were triggered into the deepest part of their nervous system and the least logical parts of their brain. Another significant thing that is similar in both videos is that neither men confessed or admitted to engaging any hurt or harm against the women. Their sole focus in those interviews with the cops were to solely talk about what the women had done to them. At one point, it is noticed that there are scratches on his hands, and the only thing that I have seen anybody say to address that is, yeah, of course you're going to have scratches on somebody's hands when they're trying to remove them. And the way that the scratches were, I understood exactly what they were saying. If somebody grabs you, you are going to fight to pull those hands off of you. And again, both of the men in their interviews didn't talk about what they did to control or try to stop anything, meaning they didn't talk about putting their hands on these women, or Dakota didn't talk about throwing Taylor, and they solely focused on how reactive and crazy Gabby and Taylor were in those moments. So again, people are looking for the perfect victim, the perfectly innocent victim who's obviously the victim simply because they didn't do anything. And there's another post from somebody else that made a really great point when it comes to reactive abuse. And what people haven't been focusing on when Dakota starts recording is that he pretty much stays at the same volume and same tone while he's narrating what's happening. And what he's saying is, oh, look, Taylor, you're hurting me. That's all you're good for, is hurting me. He's not terrified. He's not trying to make a run for it. He's not trying to get away, and he's not trying to fight back in a way that demonstrates that he's terrified of what's happening. Rather, he's more focused on narrating and documenting what she's doing to him. And that's what I'm going to talk about in my next post.